If you've been scrolling through endless camera comparisons, feeling that knot in your stomach every time a spec sheet pops up, you're not alone. The "which one actually works for me" question can feel like a trap, especially when the gear you end up with could sit in a drawer for months or become the workhorse that finally lets you capture the moments you've been dreaming about. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. In this video, I'm going to walk through the Sony Alpha SLT A99V, the full-frame model that sits between the old-school DSLR crowd and the mirrorless Wave, and help you decide whether it's the camera that will finally give you confidence behind the shutter or just another piece of tech you'll ignore. First off, the A99V is built on Sony's SLT, single-lens translucent, design, meaning it uses a fixed, semi-transparent mirror instead of the traditional flipping one. For most people that sounds like a techie footnote, but it actually changes how the camera behaves in everyday shooting. Because the mirror never moves, the viewfinder and the sensor are both getting light at the same time, which translates into a smoother, lag-free preview when you're tracking moving subjects. If you've ever tried to capture kids running, a dog leaping, or a street scene where people are constantly shifting, that constant view can feel like you're looking through a window rather than a camera that's constantly blinking. In real-world use, the AF stays on while you're composing, and you can keep the focus point locked on a subject even as you pan. That confidence is something a lot of beginners miss. They stare at the viewfinder, press the shutter, and end up with a soft face because the focus never caught up. With the A99V's 19-point phase detect AF, which works in both stills and 1080p video, the focus lock is surprisingly reliable, especially when you're shooting in decent daylight. Low light performance is another frequent worry. The sensor is a 24-megapixel full-frame CMOS, and the native ISO range goes up to 25,600. In practice, that means you can comfortably shoot indoor events like birthday parties or low-key music gigs without having to crank the aperture open to its limits. I tested it in a dimly lit restaurant, a setting where many entry-level full-frame bodies start to get noisy, and the images kept a decent amount of detail with only a mild grain that you can clean up in post. The downside is that the camera doesn't have in-body image stabilization, so you'll need to pair it with a lens that includes OSS, optical steady shot, if you plan to handhold slower shutter speeds. For a lot of hobbyists who already own a handful of Sony mount lenses, that's not a huge hurdle. But if you're buying a kit and don't want to think about lens choices, it's a factor to keep in mind. Speaking of lenses, Sony's mount ecosystem is huge and continues to grow. The A99V can use everything from the classic 2470mm f/2.8G series to the newer 85mm f/1.4 for portrait work, and you'll also find a decent selection of affordable third-party options. The real advantage of the SLT design here is that the phase detect AF points work with any lens that supports it, so you get fast focus even on older glass. If you're a creator who already has a stash of Sony lenses, this camera slots right in. If you're starting from zero, you'll need to budget for at least one fast prime or a versatile zoom if you want to make the most of the sensor's dynamic range. Menu navigation on Sony bodies has a reputation for being a bit of a maze, and the A99V is no exception. The top plate has a handful of custom buttons, which is great once you've programmed them, but the initial learning curve can feel steep. I spent a few minutes just digging through the setup and custom settings menus to assign a quick access button for IAF, which turned out to be a game-changer for portrait work. If you're the type who enjoys tinkering and setting up custom shortcuts, you'll probably enjoy this level of control. If you prefer a camera that works straight out of the box with minimal menu diving, you might find yourself frustrated, especially when you need to switch between stills and video modes and the screen layout shifts. Battery life is an often overlooked metric, but for a full-frame camera it matters a lot if you plan on shooting all day. The A99V uses Sony's NPF 970 battery, and in my tests it gave me roughly 500 shots before needing a recharge, roughly the same as many mid-range DSLRs. That's solid enough for a day of weddings, a weekend photo walk, or a multi-hour video shoot, as long as you carry a spare or a portable charger. The LCD is a 3-inch semi-articulated screen with a decent 1.23 million dot resolution. It flips up enough for low-angle shots and flips down for selfies or vlogging, But it doesn't swivel fully around, so you'll still need to get in front of the